Thank you for watching On Call for All Kids. Today we'll be talking about identifying speech and language concerns. We will discuss the most common speech language disorders in children, speech expectations for children of all ages, and what families can do at home to enrich their child's development. I am joined by Therese Montanari. She is the director of the Speech, Language, and Feeding Department at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. Great seeing you, Therese. How are you?
I'm good, Ashley. Thank you for having me today.
So, what are some of the most typical speech and language concerns that you see in children?
All right, so I think one of the biggest concerns that we see families coming in for or asking questions about center around a child's language. And I'll start with expressive language because that is what most often comes in our front door. And that is characterized by children who are not communicating like other children their age. So, for example, it could be that they're not using the sounds, the words, the phrases that maybe they should have for their age. An example may be a 2-year-old child who mom realizes is not talking like other 2-year-olds, maybe doesn't have the vocabulary or talking in phrases. So they come in the door and may have concerns about their child's expressive language. And I think parents start to get concerned because if a child cannot communicate expressively, a lot of times those children, they understand the world around them and they become very frustrated. And I think family often get concerned that maybe some little behavioral problems start to result by their inability to communicate to others. So an expressive language is often an area that families have lots of questions about. I would like to add, we have a unique program here. We have our Scottish Rite here at the main campus. We have a preschool for children ages 2 to 4 years of age, and it's a language preschool class. It is run by a certified pediatric speech language pathologist, and this class is for children who have an expressive language delay. And through this class, we are targeting expressive language, understanding. We're doing language through different play activities, music, art, just to work on building a child's vocabulary. So, expressive language delay is what I would say to you, one of the most typical concerns that we see.
And so, can you kind of guide parents on what the speech expectations should be by age?
Certainly, I'll be glad to. So let me start with 6 months of age. That's typically when parents start to start realizing about communication. And at 6 months, what we like to see is some babbling and some jargon. So that ma, they're repeating a consonant and a vowel. Ma, da. And that happens about 6 months of age. Then you continue to go to 1 year of age, and that's when first words emerge. What we expect is 1 to 3 words at the age of 1. Mama, dada, maybe a pet's name, maybe bye bye. Then I will tell you between 18 months and 2 years is when language explodes. By 2 years of age, we are really expecting a child to have a vocabulary mainly between 50 and 100 words. A 2-year-old should be using 2-word phrases and some 3-word phrases. They're also starting to point to objects. Then I would say at 3 years of age, you are quadrupling it. We are expecting about 1,000 words. And at that time, they are talking in little short phrases, 3 to 5 words. They also can be able to say their name, they're asking questions, and they're maybe singing little songs. And then 4 years of age, they are talking in complete sentences. Their vocabulary is more than 1,000 words. They know their letters, they may know their numbers, they know their colors. And then 5-year-old, we consider like a mini adult. They are ready to head off to kindergarten and they are talking what like we would expect a mini adult to be.
Well, what are some common speech language disorders?
Okay, so another speech disorder is what we call either articulation, phonological, or what I think the layman would be pronunciation. So this is where children have difficulty making specific sounds. And what happens is maybe other people, grandparents, friends, are not understanding a child's speech. So they may be substituting one sound for another, like a T for a K. So they're saying tar for car or dough for go. And that may impact their speech intelligibility. And so if others do not understand their speech, once again comes in that frustration is that they have the language, they're talking, but they have so many pronunciation difficulties or phonological difficulties that they are having a difficult time with the world understanding them. And just like language, we do have expectations for articulation and phonological. And that is, we expect that for a 2-year-old, other people should understand them 70% of the time. For a 3-year-old, other people, mom and dad, understand almost everything that comes out of our sweet little children's mouths. So we like to say other people should understand. So at 3, 80% we should understand. At 4, 90%. And then as with language, when you get to B5, going off to kindergarten, we should understand you 100% of the time. And then in this broad range of articulation and phonological, there is a subset, which is children who have difficulty with what we call motor planning or sequencing sounds. And this is often called an apraxia of speech. And this is a little bit more severe, if you would, than a typical articulation delay. And like I said, it's a child that truly has difficulty with motor planning and sequencing sounds. A good word for that would be like spaghetti, just a sound that is requiring a multitude of sequencing and going from one sound to the next. So that's when, if parents have concerns that other children aren't understanding them, that is when you want to seek out a licensed pediatric speech pathologist, because we do want to offer a differential diagnosis. Is it a typical articulation delay, or is it more of an apraxia of speech? So Ashley, I would say those two, expressive language delay, the articulation and phonological, are probably the two biggest speech and language areas that we have concerns about, that parents often have concerns about.
Well, can you provide some insight or tips for families that they can do at home to help improve or enrich their child's speaking language development?
Certainly. So we always say play, 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 and read, read, read. Children birth to 3, they learn language through play, through mom, dad, caregiver, modeling words, giving choices. Do you want the car or the farm? And then when you have the farm out, you may be modeling what different animals say. And then what you want to do is, after you model, you kind of want to be quiet and see if that child can imitate an approximation of what you just modeled. So again, you want to model, you want to offer choices. And I think that is the biggest thing that we can do, is play with our child, modeling sounds and words, expanding. If the child says truck, you may say, oh, you want the big truck? You can expand one word of what the child said. And that's how we start with increasing vocabulary, and then increasing vocabulary to the word combinations.
Finally, if parents just truly are concerned, they feel like something just isn't right, what would you suggest that they do?
So I would always suggest that you first talk to your primary physician. So go to your physician, let them know your concerns. I will say sometimes moms will come in and say they went to their physician. The physician was like, let's give it a little bit more time. But some moms or dads may report that their child just became more and more frustrated, and they just really had strong concerns. So they just initiated to give a center that has a pediatric speech language pathologist. And I think coming in for a evaluation, to come in for a one-time evaluation, and let's rule out, is this a language delay, an articulation? Is it just that we can give you some suggestions, and you can go on home and try some of those suggestions that we gave? So again, I think if parents have concerns, start with their physician, and then also reaching out to a pediatric speech language pathologist.
All right, Therese, thank you so much for joining us and giving us all this insight on speech and language development in children. We appreciate having you here.
Great. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here today.
And thank you all so much for watching today. Don't forget, you can also visit our website. It's hopkinsallchildrens.org/newsroom. There you'll find a lot of great topics in pediatric healthcare and other wonderful resources for your family. We'll see you next week.